Okay, over to everyone. So there's a very interesting discussion, somewhat strange, somewhat entertaining almost, that the poskim have based on this week's parasha. We've been talking about the man the last couple of days. So there's a question, and as you'll see, there is actually a relation to halakha l'maaseh with this question, although at first glance it doesn't sound like it. And the question is, what bracha did Am Yisrael say before they ate the man?
I don't know what happened with this. He's sweet.
That's one of the answers. We'll get there, right? So the truth is, Rav Ovadia has a tshuva. Long tshuva. His stand is not very long, but it's fairly long. And in there, he has a whole discussion about this question. Spoiler: the question he was asked was not what was the bracha Bnei Israel said on the man. He was asked a different question, practical halachic question. And as part of his discussion, he goes into this whole sugya, and we'll see at the end. We'll see how it connects and what the question he was asked was. So what bracha did they say? So the Gemara in bracha tells us that regarding the after bracha, we know that it says we have 4 brachot of Birkat HaMazon, which we have nowadays. The first 3 of the Oraita, the last one probably the Rabbanan. And the first bracha was, the Gemara tells us who composed each of the brachot. The first bracha, Birkat HaZan, was composed by Moshe Rabbeinu, right, for the man. So for the man, they had Birkat HaZan, and that is the bracha to say afterwards. What is the bracha that would have been said before? So you might say, and some say, that if they were saying Birkat HaZan afterwards on the man, then before they would say Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. As people have already pointed out tonight, right? The problem with that is the man did not come Min Haaretz, it came Min HaShamayim. So there are those, and going back all the way, Sefer Hasidim says the bracha they said was not Hamotzi Lechem Min HaShamayim, it says Hanoten Lechem Min HaShamayim, because it was not brought forth from the Shamayim, it came down. That's the Sefer Hasidim. But there are others who say in different Girsaot, etc. But this is quite famous, right? The Ramami says, he says the following. He says, the end of days, in the future, there's going to be a Suda. There's going to be a Suda, we're going to eat the Livyatan. Tzadikim are going to have a Suda of the Livyatan. You can't have a Suda without bread, however. So what bread are you going to have? So there is the Tzintzenet HaMan, which the Torah tells us there was a piece of man which was kept, and was kept as a remembrance for generations. And Yoshiyahu hid it away. So in those days, that Tzintzenet HaMan is going to come out again. And he says the bracha that's going to be made on that man is Hamotzi Lechem Min HaShamayim. So that is one opinion. The truth is, if you look hard enough, you go through all the Sfarim, you can probably find opinions that say every single one of the brachot that you can think of was the one that was said on the man. I won't go through all of them, but just a couple. So that is one opinion. Then there's another opinion which says, what bracha? They didn't say any bracha. There was no bracha at all. Why? So the Bnei Saschar says the following. He says, why do we have to make a bracha? He says a Kabbalistic concept. He says part of it is just like when you eat food. You have the part which is going to provide you with nutrients, the part which is good in a physical sense, and there's the waste as well. He says in a spiritual sense as well, each food, that item has got that which is going to provide you spiritual sustenance. It's got that which is the waste, so to speak. By saying the bracha, you are elevating all the components of it so that it's going to, you'll only get the benefit and not the harm. However, when it comes to the man, which was a purely spiritual food, it was called lechem abirim. It went into all the ramach evarim, the different limbs of the body. It only had goodness in it. Therefore, there was no need, says the Bnei Saschar, to say a bracha. They didn't have to say a bracha beforehand. Like I said, Kabbalistic concept, but that's what he says. There's no bracha. The Maharsha, bringing it down a little bit, says the following. He says, how could they not say a bracha? We have a principle that whenever a person derives benefit, Ram Bracha tells us that if a person needs to say a bracha before getting any benefit from this world, if you benefit from the world without saying a bracha, there's a form of me'ilah, there's a form of stealing, for getting benefit from a Kadosh Baruch Hu's world without that bracha. So it says the Maharsha, yes, but what does the Gemara say? It says that if you get benefit from Olam Hazeh, from this world, the man did not come from this world, the man came from Shamayim, the man came from the next world, that was something else, and therefore a bracha was not required, so to speak. So those are the first two opinions we have. As I say, motzi lechem, as you all said, motzi lechem min hashamayim, or perhaps they didn't say a bracha at all. Then, like I said, there are those who say all sorts of other opinions we can find. There's one which seems to maybe contradict the first thing which we said. Kli chemda says actually the bracha was, sounds quite unlikely, he says borei pri ha'adama. Why borei pri ha'adama? He says because we know we've spoken the last couple of days, you could not collect the man on Shabbat, right? And that's why on Friday there was on fall on Shabbat, there was a double portion. But he says that it was considered, if somebody had gone and had collected it, that would have been based on the Sforno. The Sforno says in his commentary to the Chumash that if you had gone and collected the man on Shabbat, it would have been it was tolesh min hakarka. You are it's a derivative of the malacha of kotzer, of harvesting of something which is there, and therefore in a sense it would seem to be considered something that's attached to the ground, and therefore it would be borei pri ha'adama. I think it's a minority opinion. But like I said, that stands somewhat in contradiction to the first thing we said, which is you can't say motzi lechem min haaretz because it doesn't come from the ground; it's from Shamayim. How can you say borei pri ha'adama? Okay, so that is but that is one opinion we find. We find others who say that bracha was mizonot. We find others who say, in fact, the bracha could be whatever you want, right? We know that when you would eat the man, Hazal tell us, it could taste like any food that a person wanted it to taste. So when a person had their man, they could decide what it was going to be, and then there's an opinion that says they could therefore say the bracha for whatever it was, whatever that food would be. By the way, there's discussion here as well. Again, sounds a little bit strange, but the discussion is that in a sense, when somebody would eat the man, how did you cook the man? The Psukim talk about it. So there are different opinions in Chazal about whether they had to cook it as actually or not. But there are those midrashim that say a person would taste it, whatever taste they would have in their mouth, that would be whatever taste they would have in their head, that would be the taste of the man. You would turn into that food. The way that you would cook it, amazing thing, by thought. You think what you want the food to be, and that's how you would cook it, transform it into that food, and you laugh. But there are discussions today, we've mentioned last night, about some of these things, all sorts of new sort of machines and automation and things where you can do malachot by speaking, or in the future have where you can do malachot by thinking. Where do you find a source? Where do you find a precedence for something where you can, you'll have a smart home, you'll have a very smart home, just think something and it starts cook or starts operating. Can you bring a source from here? Probably not, but again, it's very, very interesting. The poskim do raise that we have these midrashim and we have these sources of cooking something by thought. And again, now this is something which is going to be relevant in a different way. But in any event, that is that regarding the bracha. Okay, so why does all of this matter? What has this got to do halacha lamaaseh? What bracha Bnei Yisrael said on the man? So it's like this. Rav Ovadia, when he talks about this in Yechavedat, the question he was asked was not what bracha you say on the man, but what bracha you say on vegetables, and not just any vegetables, but hydroponically grown vegetables. In other words, they discovered that you don't actually need, generally speaking, vegetables grow in soil in the ground. However, there are nutrients which the roots need to take hold in the soil, and they need to get those nutrients in order for the plant to grow. They discovered that if you could take those nutrients and you could provide those nutrients from another source, give the vegetables something, the roots, some sort of structure on which to hold on, then they can grow, and you don't actually need to grow them in the ground. So you can grow vegetables in water. This is what's called hydroponic, where you take inside the water has got all the nutrients which are required to grow. There's some sort of structure for the roots to take hold of, but it's not in soil, it's not in the ground. You get the same tomatoes, you get the same cucumbers, whatever it is, but it grows not in the ground, but it grows in water.
Well, yes. It's the same with mushrooms, right? You would say, because the mushrooms don't grow on the ground either.
Right, so mushrooms are a little bit different, and that's why the Gemara says the mushrooms, right? The mushrooms don't actually grow on the ground, and therefore that's why the bracha of mushrooms is shakol,
right,
and
so
it's not.
Would it be the same for hydroponic?
So would it be the same for hydroponic? That's the question. So Rav Ovadia says yes. He says on these types of vegetables, the bracha would not be borei pri ha'adama, the bracha would be shakol, and he brings three proofs for this. Proof number one, he says, there's a Chayei Adam based on Yerushalmi, who's asked, where discusses the question: if you have wheat which was grown was grown in a flower pot, it sits it was not grown on the ground itself, but it was grown in soil, but it's not attached to the ground. Would the bracha still be hamotzi lechem min haaretz? Right, the Yerushalmi asks this question, discusses. The Chayei Adam says no. in such a scenario, the bracha would be Borei Minei Mezonot. You would still say Birkat Hamazon, it would be Borei Minei Mezonot. Others disagree, but that is what the Chai Adam says. So Rav Vadia says that is his proof number one. His proof number two is when it comes to Shemitah. When it comes to the Shemitah year, when you can't plant in the ground, would you be able to plant, so to speak, these hydroponic vegetables? And many authorities say, yes, you would. That would not be a transgression of the laws of Shemitah, and therefore it's not considered in the ground, it's considered something else. And source number three, he says, and this is where he gets into the discussion of the bracha of the mann, and he says that since, according to most, if not all of the authorities, we don't say, although it was lechem, maybe, but we don't say motzi lechem mina aretz, because it didn't come from the ground, and therefore he says based on all those reasons, these vegetables, the bracha would be shehakol. Now he says, if you don't know, and most of the time you probably won't know, and since most vegetables still grow in the ground, you go by the rov, you don't have to be choshesh, and you would say the bracha of borei pri adama. But if you know for certain that they were grown in water, then you would say that would be the bracha, it would be shakol. Not everybody agrees, as usual, right? But that's what Rav Ovadia says. Other poskim, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Rav Wosner, Rav Sternbuch as well, they say that at the end of the day, a vegetable is a vegetable. The bracha of borei pri ha'adama does not mean necessarily this vegetable grew in the ground, but this is part of a species. This is part of a type which grows in the ground. And therefore they say, imagine a person's got, two cucumbers in front of them, and one of the cucumbers is borei pri ha'adama, and one of the cucumbers is shakol. It seems a little bit strange. So therefore they say that you would still say borei pri ha'adama, because Rav Vadia says shakol. We know that b'di'evet, in any event, if one was to say, but if one was to say shakol, they would be yotzei anyway. Rav Vadia says that if you say borei pri ha'adama, because it still is a vegetable, so that would be valid. So at the end of the day, whatever you say would still be valid. But that is the discussion, that is the machloket, and the fascinating precedent which comes from the bracha over the man. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer, Tzakadosh Baruch Hu lezakot Yisrael lefi hachal b'alei mitzvot, shneimar dan yachvetz man tzidko, yagdil Torah